Hello, we are with our guest, Professor Dr. Brian C.J. Moore today. I would like to thank you for accepting our invitation. And now I want to begin my questions.
Okay.
My first question is, how did you meet audiology?
Well, I'm not trained as an audiologist. I started out as a basic scientist. So I studied at Cambridge University in the UK, and there, when you do science, you do something called natural sciences, where you can select different subjects. And I was originally intending to specialize in physics, but I was always interested in sound and acoustics and so on. But then later on, I took psychology, and the senses, including vision and hearing, are part of psychology. So that's when I first started learning about hearing itself. But for many years, I did research just on basic aspects of hearing rather than hearing impairment. I was mostly studying people with normal hearing. But gradually, I got involved in studying hearing impairment and doing research on hearing aids, and ended up collaborating a lot with audiologists and with hearing aid companies and hearing aid researchers. And so gradually I moved more towards audiology, and I've had audiologists working in my group, but I myself don't have formal qualifications in audiology.
My next question is, in your opinion, is only audiology education sufficient to succeed in the field of audiology? If not enough, in which areas should we support ourselves?
Well, I think it depends a bit on what kind of career you have in mind. I mean, some people are happy simply to practice audiology, to see patients, to evaluate them, to diagnose the problem, to fit them with hearing aids or cochlear implants. So that they're happy just doing that basic kind of work. And to do that, I think just studying audiology is probably sufficient. But many audiologists like to get involved in research as well, to try to progress the field. And there is evidence that in centers of audiology where people do research, patients get a better quality of care and better outcomes. So I think sort of doing research gives better outcomes overall for the patient and for the individual. And if you want to do research, you maybe need to think in a slightly different way, because I think in most countries, audiologists are not trained in how to do scientific research and how to formulate research questions, how to design experiments, to give you, so you get a good answer to the questions you're asking. So there, I think it helps to at least have some collaborations with basic scientists. I mean, some people study audiology and then do a PhD, and a PhD, of course, is basically a training in how to do research. But I think it's also possible to learn how to do research by collaborating with other people who have more experience, and so I've had many audiologists who I've collaborated with over the years, where I've helped to formulate the research questions and design the study, but then the audiologists have gone away and done the study, and then we've evaluated the results together. So a bit depends on whether you're happy just to stick to doing the basic diagnosis and treatment, or if you would really like to explore a bit more and do some research yourself and advance the field a little bit.
My third question is, what would you advise to audiology students about their careers? What path should they follow in career planning?
Well, this relates a bit to the previous question. So if they're happy just to see patients, diagnose patients, and organize treatment for the patients, then they can stop at that. They don't need more training, and they can just continue to be an audiologist. Now, I'm not sure about the situation in in Turkey, but I know in the UK, some audiologists go on to set up a private practice of their own. So we have basically for if you want to get a hearing aid in the UK, there are two paths. One is via our National Health Service, which provides hearing aids free, and the other is via a private person who can sell you a hearing aid, often for quite a lot of money. And the difference between the two is that a private dispenser may have more time to fit the hearing aid to an individual, and they may have a greater range of hearing aids, including the most recent and advanced models. Whereas on our National Health Service, people that they often use sort of last year's hearing aids or hearing aids that are not quite the latest model and don't quite have the latest features. Now, from the audiologist's point of view, they can often make more money as a private dispenser than working for the National Health Service. But of course, you need to have some capital to set up a practice in the first place. You need some finance to get started. But many people would join an established private practice, work there for a while, and then maybe think about setting up their own practice somewhere else. So that's a path that can be followed. And even though if you buy a hearing aid privately in the UK, it's quite expensive, still a lot of people do that, partly because of the greater range of hearing aids and partly because of the greater time that's spent. And I know one audiologist I know very well who works in the UK specializes in pediatric audiology, in evaluating hearing in children and fitting them with hearing aids. And she used to work for our National Health Service, but she became frustrated because she didn't have enough time to evaluate each child. She couldn't do it as thoroughly as she would like. And so she set up a private center devoted to evaluating children where the parents have to pay for her service, but then she can really take her time to evaluate each child very thoroughly, maybe to try out different hearing aids and different kinds of settings in hearing aids and to monitor the progress of the child. And of course, a third kind of career path would be to try and get some extra qualification like a PhD, and then to go on to do research in the field of audiology, research and teaching. So that's another possible path to go on.
Thank you, sir. My fourth question is, what are your suggestions for making a difference in the field of audiology?
Okay, well, I think, of course, making a difference usually involves doing research of some type. And so the first important thing is to identify what you see as an outstanding problem. What is something where patients aren't satisfied, where there's some uncertainty, where we need some new knowledge. So the first thing is to identify a key problem, and that could involve both reading of the scientific literature on a particular topic, but also just talking to your patients, asking them about what aspects of their treatment they were happy with, what aspects did they find problematic. And I think there's room for research, even in some very simple, basic things. Now, if we take hearing aids, for example, now hearing aids nowadays do some very complicated kind of processing that probably only the manufacturer really understands how it works. But it's recommended in clinical practice that when you fit a hearing aid, you do real ear measurements with a probe microphone in the ear canal to verify the frequency response and to adjust it appropriately. But most people who do that only do it for one input sound level, a medium sound level, say 65 dB. Now, it's my experience that the manufacturer's software can't always be relied upon. You can program something into a hearing aid, but it doesn't always give you what you program in. And in particular, I found that a lot of hearing aids prescribe less compression than the standard fitting formulas like NAL, NL2, or one we've developed in Cambridge that we call CAM2. And you can program the software so that it looks as though it should be doing the right amount of compression. But if you measure at different sound levels, you find it's not compressing as much as it should do. And that's quite common. And so I think one example of a research study, a fairly simple one, would be to, first of all, measure what a good sample of hearing aids are actually doing at different sound levels. When you program them to have a certain amount of compression, do they actually give you that amount of compression? And secondly, if you then do find some way of implementing the correct amount of compression, which may mean changing the programming, do the patients get some benefit from that? Are they more satisfied with the fitting? Do they report that they're less bothered by very loud sounds, or that they have an improved ability to hear soft sounds? So that's just an example. So I think the thing is to identify areas where you think there are problems remaining, and then think about ways that you could go of investigating those problems and figuring out a better solution to them.
That's very helpful, sir. I would like to ask you, could you share your 3 golden rules for life in general?
Okay, well, that's a rather tricky one. I would say, first of all, don't put things off. A lot of people say, "Oh, I'm concerned about this problem or that problem, but I'll just do the easy things now and put that problem in the background." And I think that doesn't work. So if you've got some difficult problem to handle, then deal with it soon rather than putting it off. Secondly, I would say sort of be determined. If you have some goal about your life or your career, keep trying to do it. Don't give up. And I know, for example, that many students in Turkey try to spend some time in a lab elsewhere, and you may have to write to many people in different labs before you can get someone to accept you. But you have to be determined and keep trying. So determination is a key thing. But I guess the third key thing is to remain optimistic. There are always possibilities for better things. And even if you're doing research and the results don't turn out the way you expected, that's not necessarily a bad thing. Many great discoveries started by people looking at their results and saying, that's strange. I didn't expect that. You see something unexpected in your results. So there's usually something good that comes out, even if you do a study where the results turn out completely different from what you would expect. So look for the positive side of things. Don't just focus on the negative side.
My last question is, what are your expectations from young people in the field of audiology?
Okay, well, I think you need to be prepared for quite large changes in the coming years, not just in the development of hearing aids, but in terms of diagnostic methods. And at the moment, like when you're evaluating the hearing of a person, the audiogram is the main measure that you do. But I think in the future, people will take more measurements. For example, at present, there's a lot of interest in something called cochlear synaptopathy. And this is where with increasing age or with exposure to noise, you can get damage to the synapses between the inner hair cells and the neurons that make up the auditory nerve. And that may lead to difficulties, particularly for understanding speech in noise, without having much effect on the audiogram. So the audiogram isn't telling you everything that you need to know. So I think that audiology students will have to be prepared to think about doing other tests than just the audiogram, psychoacoustic tests, you might say. And so there may need to be a bit more learning about psychoacoustics, about the perception of sound, how sounds are coded and represented in the auditory system, and to understand the relationship between the underlying physiological processes that are going wrong and the perceptual consequences of that. And my belief is that we're going to find increased applications of artificial intelligence of various kinds for diagnostic purposes and even for hearing aid fitting. And I've been working with colleagues on more efficient tests of hearing using machine learning, so-called, which is a kind of artificial intelligence. So even the audiogram can be done more quickly than is typically done by hand, right, by an audiologist. And what I envisage in the future is that you would administer a whole battery of tests more or less automatically, run by machines, as it were, by a very fancy audiometer. But you still need to be able to interpret the outcomes, understand what these tests mean, what information they're giving you about the person. So I think more understanding of the fundamental operation of the auditory system, things that can go wrong as you get older and as you get a hearing loss, things that aren't revealed by the audiogram, and learning how we can use all that information to fit hearing aids better and to adjust the signal processing in hearing aids better to suit the individual. But I think there will be sort of lots of technical changes coming along that you will need to get up with, keep up with. I think you can also have some influence on manufacturers of hearing aids. And my experience is that the fitting software is often a little bit hard to interpret. There are aspects of the fitting software where you're not quite sure what it does. And this comes particularly in relation to the speed of the compression that they have. And some manufacturers have settings like calm and exciting, and they have things that they call sound smoothing, and you're never quite sure what's going on. And I think the manufacturers need to be persuaded to make their fitting software a bit more transparent and understandable. And I think that will only come by feedback from audiologists to the manufacturers saying, look, I don't understand what this setting is doing. Can you explain it better? And they need better instructions manuals to go with their fitting software. And again, it's pleas from audiologists, the people who are using this software, that will lead them to improve this and make it better.
So, sir, that was it. Thank you.
All right.
For participating to our People Contributing to Audiology project. If you want to add anything, is there anything you want to add?
No, I think we've covered all the points you wanted to raise. So it's been a pleasure talking to you this morning, and I hope that you get some nice interviews with other people too.
Thank you. It was an honor to interview with you.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
All right.
I'm now ending. Thank you.